complexity with which these 5 elements are put together to function in a certain manner is mind-boggling. The first year MBBS students, when they go to medical school, one of the toughest course they have is anatomy. Just to remember the parts of the body itself is so difficult. Remember all the parts of the body. Right? And in fact, I don't know if any one of you have been to this Iyengar yoga class, because when I used to live in the US, I tried one of these Iyengar yoga class. And they tell you, oh, you know, the certain parts of the body that they ask you to move this way and move that way. And I said, like, what part is it? I don't even know what you're talking about, let alone to move it, but I don't even know what you're referring to. Right? So therefore, it's a complex mechanism, right? So therefore, now, there are 2 things that you have to remember. It's a complex mechanism, but it is 5 elements, it is not I. But the second most important thing is, and you know, the minute you make that mistake and you think that the body is I, you take on what? All the limitations of the body as limitations of on yourself, and then you are stuck. Okay? So the very thing which is a gift becomes what? A source of all kinds of complexes. Right? So this is me, as I told you, so much of our self-esteem is dependent upon our what? Physical features. How you look, how tall you are, what's the color of your skin, you know, all, I mean, and not only that, but you know, your certain feelings that you have of inadequacy, okay, of lack, of feeling, you know, a certain amount of inferiority complex, jealousy. It's all based on what? So much of it is based on your identification with the physical body. And not only that, what? This ultimate fear of mortality. So that means it's not a small mistake. Please understand, when you correct this mistake, it's not just, yeah, I'm not the body. It becomes all mechanical. If you really understood and assimilated, you can't have, on one hand, you can say, oh, Vedanta says that I'm not the body, right? And you said, I have understood. And at the same time, what? Have jealousy towards somebody else who has, according to you, what? Better figure or whatever. Better figure. Right? So that means this knowledge that you have is what? No, it's, you think you understand, but have you assimilated? Exactly. Right? So that means it takes a long time for Vedanta to seep into your
DNA.
Absolutely. To where your whole life, what, and your whole understanding and your whole way you look at the world and you look at yourself, it gets what? Gets totally what? It's assimilated knowledge. So this is why people ask, oh, you've studied Vedanta but you haven't changed. That happens because we understand things, but there are levels of understanding. And that level of understanding is, you know, see, for example, I tell you E is equal to mc square. What does E is equal to mc square? What does it mean? Energy is equal to mass, right? So therefore, this is what Einstein's equation, right? That every form is nothing but energy and they are interchangeable. Mass is equal to energy. Now when I talk about it, and when a physicist who has studied 20 years of physics talks about it, it seems as though we are saying the same thing. But what is the depth of that physicist understanding and what is the depth of my understanding? You can't compare. You can't compare, right? Because if somebody asks me just one equation, I will be lost. But the person, you question 20,000 things and he'll be able, if the person has understood it accurately, what will happen? The person, what, will be able to examine all the different contentions that you have, he'll be able to answer, and he operates from a certain clarity. Same thing. People say, oh, Vedanta, I've understood. It's I'm not the body, I'm not the body. And when you say, it's like a parrot repeating, I'm not the body, whereas all the other complexes remain intact. So that means there is not enough integration and clarity of thought. That means one part of the brain understands, the other part of the brain is what?
Vague.
Is just kind of continuing from the past, orientations and behaviors. It's not all. The implications of what I have studied is not well integrated into my being. And this is why people say, oh, Vedanta, whether you study Bhagavad Gita or you study Upanishads, it's all saying basically the same thing. They say, I've studied this. You've studied this, but it takes lifetimes to totally understand all the implications of what we are talking about, where if anybody is to stand in front of you, of whether it's a physicist or a neuroscientist, and engage in a dialogue, and if they are open, they will see that what you know is something which is unshakable. That is what we call well assimilated knowledge. Okay, so therefore, please don't make it into some kind of a superficial learning. Vedanta is not superficial. You need to have a certain depth, and for that it takes time. Okay, so that is one problem. Now the other problem is that not well assimilated knowledge is one problem. The second problem is even a bigger problem, and that is, I am not the body, so therefore what? I just have to be detached to the body. This detachment is one of the biggest problems. Where is the question of detachment? You are given this body, it is meant for you to use it. Just because you are not the body doesn't mean that you have to be detached from it. It's a source. It's a resource which is given to you. You have to take care of it, and you have to even beautify it. Why not? In Kathopanishad, there is a beautiful analogy. The analogy is that there is a horse, there's the owner of chariot who has to reach the destination. Okay, and for reaching that destination, the owner of the chariot needs what? There is a chariot, the physical chariot, then there are horses. Let's say there are 5 horses. Then there is who? There are reins. Then there is what? The charioteer, right? And then there is the owner of the chariot. The owner of the chariot has to reach the destination. Okay? Now, what is the destination? So that means this whole scenario is equated to human beings coming on this earth. You land up one day on this earth and you're given a chariot. What is a chariot? Your physical body. Right? And what are these 5 horses? Your 5 sense organs. Your 5 senses are your horses. Right? What is the rein? Your mind. Your mind is the rein because the senses, all the 5 senses through the reins get centralized into what? One space. So everything that your sense organs report, it gets centralized and it is reported where? In your mind. This is where all the processing happens. Right? And from this is where all the decisions are taken. So what is that decision? The charioteer, using the reins, does what? Guides to reach the final destination. So what is the charioteer? In this case, your buddhi, your intellect. Okay? And based on that, what? The chariot owner reaches the final destination. Now, imagine that means that the body is given is a resource. What is the end that a human being has to reach? According to Vedanta, what is the end? Moksha is the end. Human life is meant for moksha. What is moksha? Moksha is freedom. Freedom from what? Freedom from all that you don't want. What do you don't want? Limitation, mortality. You don't want what? That feeling of smallness, feeling of lack. Freedom from sadness, freedom from jealousy. All these, freedom is something from everything that you don't want. Okay, so that is the human goal. Human being, this is what that pursuit of moksha is the end, according to Vedanta Shastra and Bhagavad Gita. Okay, for that freedom, you are given what? That is the destination. You are given the chariot. The body is something which is needed. Without body, there is no inquiry. Without body, there is no what? You can't do anything. So body is something which is an instrument, just because the chariot, now imagine, the chariot owner starts thinking, I am the chariot. What is the problem?
Wrong identification.
Completely wrong identification, right? The chariot owner is basically different from the chariot. If the chariot owner starts thinking, I am as good as the chariot, what will happen? Whole life will go in what? Making the chariot beautiful. And what is really the purpose of chariot? To just make it beautiful or take you to the destination?
To reach a destination.
To reach a destination. So therefore, the whole use is what? It's all, and whole life is just in decoration. This is what we do. This body, which is an instrument, we take it as I, and whole life becomes what?
Beautification.
Beautification. The whole human end becomes beautification. Now, if the chariot owner is told that you are not the chariot, but you are the owner, which is distinct from the chariot, does it mean that the person doesn't have to take care of the chariot? No. Because the person needs the chariot. Does it mean that he doesn't clean the chariot? Does it mean that when the wheels are not working well, you just be indifferent to it? No. You need to take care of the chariot because it is a resource which is given to you. You need to have a proper, because you are not that doesn't mean that you have to be indifferent to it. That is another mistake people make when they don't make it so clear when they teach Vedanta. Becomes like a detached. Does the chariot owner have to be told you have to be detached with the chariot? No. This is a wrong message. The minute you start wanting to detach from the chariot, what will happen? You cease to have proper relationship with it. Neither you have to be detached nor you have to be attached, or you just need to know the reality. All Vedanta teaching is all just realities. The teacher doesn't tell you, you should do this, you should not do this. That person hasn't understood Vedanta. Vedanta is just throwing light on what is. And which always be. Either you understand it accurately or you don't understand it accurately. So the attempt of the teacher is what? To make you see what is. The very word Guru comes from that. Gukaraha andhakaraha vai rukaraha nivartakaha andhakara nirodhitvat guru iti abhidhiyate. Beautiful. Who is a guru? Gukara stands for andhakara. Andhakara means darkness. Darkness of ignorance. Because of that ignorance or some confusion, you don't see what is. What does the teacher do? Exactly. Rukaraha nivartakaha. The teacher's job is not to give you an advice, is to do what? Lift that veil of ignorance. So that you can see what is clearly. That is job of a teacher. You're alive to what is. And what is doesn't depend upon, as Roxy said, whether you understand it or not. It is. Okay? So therefore, this chariot, attachment, detachment, all this Vedanta, if you have learned, take it out from your mind. Because it just puts you on some kind of a advice where actually it's a fact. Mode of an advice. Okay? This is reality. Chariot is not you, but chariot is useful for you to reach the destination. Okay? Now the 5 senses are what? 5 horses. Are those senses I, the nature of I?
No.
No. Why?
Again, it keeps changing and
Absolutely. Each of the 5 senses that you have, whether it's your eyes or it's your ears or it's what? Your sense of taste, sense of smell, it's something that you identify with. Your eye gets connected to the capacity of the senses. Right? Nobody actually says I'm as good as my ears, the capacity of my ears to hear, but we make statements is what? I'm becoming deaf or I'm becoming blind. What does it mean? Your eye gets loaded with what? The capacity of your senses. Right? So now all of you, I don't know how many of you have reached early 40s, but by the time, in Gujarati we call Betara. Betara means by the time you're 42, what? Everybody starts. One way to know the age of somebody is whether they're wearing glasses or not while they read. Right? That is something means that you're born with a certain sight, but it is not a constant thing. What happens? Over a period of time, it is changing. Right? In fact, the eyes of the child is not programmed totally to give forms. You know how as an adult you see all distinguish. Their whole vision is slightly blurred. As the eyes develop, they begin to distinguish forms accurately. Then for a while they do it well, and then what? Your eyesight sometimes begins to deteriorate, then your reading abilities begin to go down. So therefore, then there is a cataract that can happen. So that means your eyes undergo, it's an instrument, it undergoes change. Okay? So now, again, the chariot owner, you, are you the senses, or you have the what? Ability to use your senses to interact with the world. Who are you? Are you the senses, or you are endowed with those senses to be able to interact with the world? That is the accurate picture. Okay? So that means these senses are not I, but because they are not I, also doesn't mean that they are useless. You need your senses. Imagine if you did not have, imagine in this world you have physical body but you have no senses. You will be not able to interact with the world. The whole window that you have in this world to interact is through the senses. Without those senses, they are the tool. Okay? There is a form and you have what? Eyes. There is smell and you have nose. There is sound and you have ears. There is food or whatever and you have taste. And there is what? Something like cold, heat, everything is what? Touch. All the pleasures that we seek, you go to spa and spend hours. What pleasure? Touch. Right? So these 5 senses is something which is your whole life. Now imagine, if you take the chariot owner takes oneself to be the horses. and whole day just starts what? Feeding to those senses. What will happen? What will happen? Because the senses means you have to see forms. How many different forms you can expose yourself to? Infinite. There is no end. You get tired of one form, then what? Another type of form. So switch to another, switch to another, switch to another. How many? Infinite possibilities. You'll be busy for rest of your life. And that's only one form, which is what? One sense organ, which is your eyes. Your ears. Music. You can spend your whole lifetime listening to music. And you can get more and it is not that it's a waste of time. You can get more and more and more refined in your taste. Right? First you start liking all these like beats, and then you begin to study ragas, differentiate. Then within ragas, how they are rendered in South India, how they are rendered in Hindustani, Karnataka. Then each one, how each artist renders it differently. I mean, it's no end. It's sophisticated. Please don't think that it is all just useless. But it is all just feeding senses and total identification with the senses. Okay? So that means something which is useful. Can you now say the senses are not you, so therefore you should not pay attention to those sense organs? No. Neither we are telling you not to be attached, nor we are telling you to be what? Detached. The reality is, it's a reality confusion. Senses, which is so essential for you to interact with the world, is taken to be I, is a problem. The minute you recognize that it is something which is necessary, it's an extremely important instrument without which my interaction with the world is impossible, I need to look after it, but it is not I, then what? I have a proper relationship with it. Okay? Anything that happens there, you need to fix it. Okay? Now, the third major identification last time we saw is with the mind. Okay? So that is like what? The charioteer. Now there is a confusion between the charioteer and what? The chariot owner. Okay? Now, what is the mind? We saw, if you ask what is the mind, it is actually nothing but thoughts. Okay? Now, every thought that you have had, how long does it last? It's seconds. Right? Now, what is your relationship with the thought? If you were the thought, before the thought came, you will not exist. And once the thought comes, you are there. When the thought goes, if you are as good as the thought, what will happen? You will also disappear. Right? So that means that there is a basic mistake that we make between what? The thoughts and what? I, which is the observer of the thoughts. Thoughts come and go. There was a study in one of, all these people do a lot of studies, and they said in one day, imagine how many different thoughts you have. How many different thoughts you have in a day? Anybody can guess?
Any amount can be
On an average.
16,000.
60,000 thoughts on an average. Human mind has 60,000 different thoughts in a day. If you were as good as the thought, when one thought comes, you will come into life and then existence, and when the thought goes, you will cease to exist. Then when the next thought comes, again you will come into existence and then you cease to exist. Is that how it is? No. What is the relationship between the thought and I? When the thought comes, am I present before the thought comes or not? Yes. I am there, and because I am there, I am able to recognize the coming of that thought. I am thinking of a tree. The tree thought was not there 1 minute ago. Now the tree thought has come. I am very much there. Who knew what? The absence of tree thought prior to that thought occurred. When that thought came, am I there or not? Am I there? Yes. Who's observing the presence of that thought? When that thought goes, am I there or not?
Yes.
I'm very much there. I'm there, and I understand now the tree thought has gone, and now I'm thinking of a cow thought. Okay, so that means you are that invariable presence who comes to know what all these different thoughts passing by. Now, what is the nature of mistake that we make? We identify ourselves with what in our mind we are as good as our thoughts. So that means if the thought is that of happiness, what happens? I say, I am happy. If thought is that of sadness, what do I say? I am sad. If the thought is that of jealousy, I say what? I am jealous. So that means my I is loaded with what? All different thoughts that I think about, and I suffer from what? The limitations of that thought life, which is what? I'm actually an observer, and the observer is always independent of the thoughts. So what Vedanta is pointing out is you are that chit. Chit is awareness, because of which you come to know your different what? Thoughts, and that chit is independent of any thoughts. Okay? Now, the thoughts are not just random. Thoughts are so well organized that, in fact, this whole personal identity that we have, okay, they are not just random thoughts and then, whatever. The thoughts themselves are, as Roxy was saying last time, that we have our self-opinion is based on the quality of thoughts that we have, but the thoughts that we have also are multifaceted. Okay, so one particular type of thought is what we call manas. Manas is a thought with reference to the emotions. Okay, so that means emotion is, you see, as I gave you the example last time, that let's say you're jogging on Marine Drive and you see this kids who are, living under that bridge, flyover, right? And you see that the parents are sleeping and the kids are running around. Now this is something which what your eyes, the forms, is something, the frame is reported to your brain, and your brain feels what? You feel like crying. If you have a proper undamaged mind, where you've somehow what? Stopped thinking about anything, okay, the natural reaction is going to be what? Some kind of an empathy for that child. That's human heart, right? So that means there is an event, and that event does what? Triggers an emotion in you. Okay, so this particular thought is what you have given some meaning to what you see, and then because of that meaning that you have given, there is a corresponding emotion. This is what we call emoting mind, right? This is something that you are programmed. Please understand, Anybody who wants to say Vedanta is just, you're not the mind, therefore you have to eliminate your emotions, they don't know what they are talking about. Mind is programmed. Imagine if you lose your capacity to have that emotion of empathy, you would become like a stone. You will become like a robot. We are not trying to make you into a robot when you study Vedanta. That emotion which triggers has a certain reality, and it is something which is, it's good. Please don't, that sadness, when you label it into a negative emotion, you are creating a huge confusion, because when you don't have that, when you desensitize yourself and you don't feel anything for that child, you are interfering with human program. You are meant to feel what that empathy works on, what it evokes certain kind of discomfort in you. If you want to become indifferent to it, what are you doing? You are making yourself into a robot. Emotions have their own place. Imagine you're walking at night, and there's this huge guy coming to you. You will have what?
Fear.
Fear. Is this fear negative? Is it negative? No.
It's a sense of protection.
Exactly. It will make you what? Alert. You will take what? Some kind of a precaution, and you will do what needs to be done to protect yourself. Categorizing emotions as what? Negative is a huge problem. Human mind is given what? Capacity to emote. And there are ranges of emotion which a human being is programmed to have. And emotions are what? Necessary, and they are healthy. In fact, what is interesting is any art form in India. You look at, if any one of you have studied the classical dance performances, Bharatnatyam. In that Bharatnatyam, there are certain pieces where it just shows a range of emotions. And the dancer depicts what? Different episodes which evoke what? Different emotions. And they take what? Certain stories from Mahabharata, Ramayana to show how different events trigger different emotions. And that is something which is universal. You go to somebody's wedding party, what is the general thing? That of celebration, happiness. Or somebody has an accident, how will you go? Concerned. So that means there's this range of emotion which adds to sanity. There is a corresponding emotion which is appropriate for that given occasion. So emotions themselves are not a problem. Don't make them into a problem. The problem is the very your relationship with the emotion.
How much weightage you give?
Not even weightage. What is your relationship with the emotion? The emotion is nothing but a thought, and who are you? You are the observer. What has happened is the emotion that you are observing, you have attributed the emotion as the nature of I. That is the problem. So that means there is a cognitive confusion that we all have. Emotion is something which is what? In form of a thought, and that thought is a passing thought. That's why every thought that you have, every emotion up to now, how many emotions you have felt? Thousands and thousands and thousands of those emotions. Do any of these emotions right now stick to you? No. What does it mean? you are the observer of emotions, but unfortunately you have taken yourself to be what? You define yourself as the emotion itself. That is the nature of the problem. Emotions are not a problem. The confusion is the problem. Okay, so therefore that I am independent of this emotion is something that you need to know. Now this manas is also defined in Vedanta as that sankalpa vikalpatmikaha manaha. Mind is also that when a situation presents itself, right? You see this child, parents are sleeping, the child is under the overhead bridge, and it's about to begin to run towards the road. Then the mind that it evokes that emotion of empathy, then it presents what? Choice. What is the nature of choice? You have several choices that your mind will present. Either you just walk away saying that this is not my problem, and you tell yourself that, oh, there are so many kids like that, I can't be bothered about changing everybody's life, and I continue jogging. That's first choice. That is what? Not doing anything about it. The second choice is what? If the child is running towards the road, you physically bring the child back. So that means in this very little few minutes, few seconds, you actually you are processing the whole thing, and you're telling yourself, should I take him back? Should I just leave him? Or should I wake up his parents? Right? So that means all this happens within span of seconds. So that particular way, that mode is also manas. It gives emotions and it creates choices of actions. Presents different choices. And we are not trying to abort all these faculties. They are very important for you to live what? A sane, healthy life. What we are trying to do is, with those faculties, I have a wrong identification as I'm just removing it so that those faculties are used adequately. Okay? So therefore, this mind is something which is that thoughts that you have, they can be the first category. They can be categorized in four ways. The first way is manas. The second is buddhi. Buddhi is nishchayatmikaha buddhi. Okay? So that means you can say it intellect. In English, if you want to use the word, you would say it's intellect. Okay? So how intellect is different from emotions? In few ways. We also use cognitive capacity. You send your kids to school and they are studying, let's say, mathematics. Are they using their emoting mind? No. When they are using 2 plus 2 is equal to 4, is it the emotions? No. What is this? This is what we call the intellect. Intellect means you have the capacity to understand certain things as they are. Okay? Whether it is mathematics or it's physics or it's biology or it's medicine or whatever. Okay? So these thoughts are not just random thoughts running around, right? They have a function, very sophisticated function. So that is what we call the intellect. So with this intellect, from, as a child, you can learn 2 plus 2 is equal to 4, and as you become an adult, you can discover amazing things. You can become what? Nobel laureate. All using your cognitive capacities. You can have some major breakthroughs in what you have discovered. This cognitive capacity is not only with reference to, sometimes I have a friend who's teaching she's a teacher in New Zealand, and what she does, she's amazing. She says that most of the kids nowadays, they have some fear of mathematics. They grow up with, oh, I'm not good at math. Especially in the West, it's a very thing in fashion. Oh, I'm not good at math. Okay, so that means what she's saying is, even if you're a painter, you actually have some understanding of mathematics. Why? Because let's say you have this amount, and if you want to draw something beautiful, you need to understand the space, and your mind has done lots of calculations without you realizing it to say, okay, this I have to place here, and then that has to be here, to create a harmony. To create a harmony even in anything that you do, even if it is painting, the mind has calculated many things without your recognizing it. Okay? Any given dance that you want to do, and you can have a dance which is a very mediocre dance, or you can have a dance which creates an impact. Movements are all what? Timed, and this aesthetics that we understand, it's all what? If you, which line, permutations, combinations, what will go when. If you don't do things accurately, what it will create in the visual thing, what? Disharmony.
It has to be synchronized.
It has to be synchronized. Music, raga rendering, it's all mathematics. Beads everywhere. What she says is, we think that only when you add there is mathematics. In fact, the human mind is born with what? This whole understanding of harmony. Whether it is music, or it is art, or it is dance, it is all, our mind is figuring out a lot of mathematics. And if you begin to teach child that inherent mathematics, that the child is capable of figuring it out, she said there will be no one child who will claim, I'm not good at math. Because they have it, but they don't recognize it. Okay? So therefore, this human cognitive capacity is something which is amazing. How much it can figure out. Buddhi. Now this buddhi also is used for making what? Decisions. So that means manas creates choices, but among different choices, which one do I select? That is done where? At the level of buddhi, intellect. So that means the mind has created options. In that case, what? Ignore the situation, help the child, and bring the child back from running across, wake up the parents. These are all the options. Then using your buddhi, you will make what? You exactly one choice. And that buddhi for everyone is what? Will give different choices. That means that how cultivated your buddhi is. If your mind is not cultivated, where there are options, what will happen? You see no options. You create what? An impasse where there is no impasse. If you tell yourself, right, that okay, in this given situation, okay, there are billions of kids in India, they are all helpless and I can't be bothered about it. Then where there are options, your mind, what do? You don't create adequate options.
Clouded.
It's clouded. You're not using your faculty of mind with its potential. When you have not created enough options, then what? Where is the question of any decision making? You're aborting, you're operating at what?
Your level.
Exactly. Suboptimal level. You're not thinking about things which what you actually need to think about. Many of the things we become so superficial because our mind is gathered with lots of information which is useless, and what is important we don't think about enough. Okay, so these faculties are not ordinary. Even though they are not I, they are very important faculties. You need to develop them. Okay, so therefore this particular thing of, anytime anybody comes to me with a problem and they present the situation as though there is no solution, I said I am not going to even begin to talk, because there is no situation in this world where you can't do anything.
It's because the emotions sometimes overwhelm you and you can't
You're not
see
able
the-
to-
Absolutely.
You don't think clearly.
So that means this faculty of mind, please understand, which is manas, which gives you different options. You have not creates different options. You have not developed it enough. You need to develop that. In this given scenario, what all can I do? So you are not, the mind is not something you ignore. You need to actually work on making it really sharp. If you use Vedanta to say, oh, I'm not the mind, I'm not the mind, you will not get anywhere. You need to make it sharp, because it is working at a very suboptimal level. All confusion. Where there are choices, I don't see the choices. If I don't see the choices, how will I find the solution? Among the choices, I need to weigh pros and cons of each choice, and then I have to make a decision as to which among these choices I'm going to choose to go with. So that means that your mind is capable of doing all this. Please understand, the thoughts that you have are not just random thoughts. Extremely well organized. Okay, all these faculties. Manas, buddhi. Okay. The third one is chitta. Okay, so now imagine you have all these different thoughts.
Chittam.
If you had no memory, one thought will come and it will go and you'll have no recollection. And the second thought will come and it will go and you'll have no recollection. How will you live your life? By the time you finish having one thought, you forget. When the thought goes, you'll forget. Right? So this is what we call the chittam, what creates what all these different thoughts into one coherent what picture, memory. Right? So that means if I ask you now, how was your childhood? So what will you tell me? All different stories related to your childhood. Now that means this memory is something which is it always active? Before I ask you this question, is it something that it's constantly running in your mind? No. So that means when I ask you that question, you have the ability, in your memory there can be so much data. Please understand, the minute I begin to ask you this question, what will you do? You will retrieve that given memory and you will surface it and you will answer my question. Okay? All the exams that are taken are what? You learn, everything is stored in the memory. You don't know what is going to be asked in the exam. When the exam question comes, what do you need to do? Retrieve the relevant information. You could have studied all kinds of things, but if that question doesn't come, there is no need to retrieve that memory. Okay? That relevant memory you need to retrieve and you need to respond. Okay? So therefore, this memory function is a huge function. Okay. Now, there is one thing that are couple of things that you must recognize, which are very important things. One is there is a lot of this Neo Vedanta. They talk about what, being in the present. Being in the present is a good thing. There is nothing wrong with it. But if by that you imply that you forget about everything, you are doing one huge disservice. Because a memory is such an important function. You can't eliminate. First of all, nobody can eliminate memory. And imagine your child is told to remain in the present, and he says, I'm remaining in the present. I have not retrieved anything from my memory in my exam. What will you do to that child? Mama, I'm following your advice, living in the present. Present is just presence. Who cares about all the memory storage, whatever I have studied in school? Who cares? You will be the most unhappy person. Don't tell anybody else, or don't buy that picture for yourself. Ask anybody who has Alzheimer, where they forget. They are always in present. They don't remember anything. They forget how to open the drawer. They forget their own relatives. They forget everything. What miserable life is. Memory is the greatest gift. If your memory is playing up, right, generally what happens is, as I told you, you have selective memory. When you were a child, lots and lots of things happened, but you hold on to what? Some memories, and so that means there is a selective memory. Sometimes those selective memories can create, they can create a scenario which is not a healthy scenario. And as you begin to live your life, you keep on reinforcing the same thing, and you end up multiplying it. That is the part of the memory that you need to take care of, because it's giving you an orientation which is what? Unhealthy orientation. So just because there is this power, when it is not channelized adequately, it has created certain distortions. You don't eliminate what? The whole function. What do? You just reprogram that part which is dysfunctional. You don't eliminate memory. If it is creating a given orientation which is an unhealthy orientation, what do? You begin to put it back in place. Okay, so that means the memory, according to modern psychology, has two parts. One is the conscious memory, and the other one is the unconscious memory. When there are a lot of things that happen, I don't know whether in this class or in some other class, there's so many classes I even forgot. Let's say, what is this unconscious memory? Okay, so let's say that a child is growing up in a home where parents are fighting. Okay, so as a child, you understand that the kids know. So the kids know that there is some kind of a disharmony. Okay? And you think like our teacher used to say that parents come to us and they said, we don't fight in front of our kids. So then our teacher used to say, so that means you fight behind the doors. And if you fight behind the doors, don't think that the child doesn't know. They know it. Okay? So therefore, when there is a disharmony, then for that child, right, the brain of the child is not yet well developed. So they understand some disharmony, but they don't quite know how to make sense of it. They don't have adequate data, adequate understanding of how to make sense of it. So each child reacts differently. Okay, one child can think that my parents are like gods, they can't do anything wrong, so what, I must have done something to create that disharmony. This is this whole problem of what we call personalization. The problem which is out there is what seen as we take it upon ourselves. Now if the child orientation is not corrected, anything that happens as an adult, whatever happens, you feel what? You keep blaming yourself. You keep thinking that I must have done something wrong, I should have, so you constantly, somebody they didn't say hi to you because the person was preoccupied, and you keep on running this, what could I have done wrong, maybe I did this, maybe I did that. There's this whole big thing of what? Personalization. That becomes an orientation. Okay? In the second scenario, the child can become, in the perception of the child. We are not talking about the external reality. Okay? The person can identify with one person and says, okay, my mom is right and my dad is abusing her. That is the perception of the child in the second case. Okay? Now, that means the child would develop what? Resentment towards father. Over a period of time, what will happen is, it can get, the child goes to the teacher, finds a male teacher who's a little strict. There are 5 male teachers, 4 are fine, 1 is strict. The child, that male, exactly, selective memory, right? So that means I'm starting with a point that my father figure is not fair. Out of these 5 teachers, 4 are male, fine, 1 is a little strict. What will the child do? Add on, the male figure is unfair, right? So therefore, the child will then what? It's multiplying and growing, that building up, creating a story. Then when they have friends, right? There are 10 friends, 2 are mean, male friends. What will he do? Again build up. Over a period of time, life orientation becomes what? Male figure is not trustworthy. That becomes an untold orientation. That means every time, or sometimes when even that one person who is nice, you will always impute some meaning where actually it is not there. So you create a selective memory and you keep on building a picture and you don't even realize what you're doing. You start living with that orientation and you start believing that this is how external world is. Where is the problem? In your own perception of how you have collected what certain memories, and you've created one whole big picture which is creating an unconscious mind. Some external situations can trigger that unconscious mind and you operate from there. This is what we call dysfunctional. But as long as you think that the problem is external, will you do anything about it? No. Because you don't even realize that the problem is what? Is here. So that means you'll keep on reinforcing and making it larger and larger and larger. So that means this memory function that we have is not some ordinary thing. So much of our behavior is from that unconscious. This is why many times when people come to me with a relational problem, they tell me that otherwise this person is really nice, but sometimes the person is so angry or whatever. So what happens? normally the person is operating from conscious mind, then the unconscious takes over. When the unconscious takes over, all the rationality is lost, the lucidity is lost. The normal understanding is not available to that person. It's as though that particular pain or that particular perception takes over. And your whole behavior, your interpretation, everything is done from that. Your reactions are from there. Okay? So that means this memory is conscious and unconscious. Now, if you have to, that maybe these are just functions of your mind, but because they are not you, can you say, let me ignore them? You can't say that. When Vedanta talks about a fact, it doesn't mean that you just ignore all these activities, your emotions, your cognitive capacity, your memory. Otherwise, it would become a simplistic escape. Vedanta will become an escape. Because all your problems are at the level of mind. And if I tell you you are independent of the mind, and if you understand that because I'm independent of the mind, I have to ignore whatever happens in my mind, you will not do yourself a service. This instrument is something that you need to have a sharp, clear, clean instrument to understand this bigger picture. If it is all confused instrument, if the charioteer is all drunk, the charioteer has no clue, even though the owner of the charioteer is independent of that charioteer, that the owner needs the charioteer to go to the destination. If the charioteer has zero capacity to analyze, zero lucidity, how will the owner of the chariot reach the destination? Okay, so that means if the owner of the chariot wants to reach the destination, has to ensure that the charioteer is what? Very skilled, very alert, is lucid, has clarity about where one has to go, how does one go there, navigate effectively. Okay, so therefore this body, the mind, this whole antakarana is not I, which if the Vedanta teacher doesn't know how to handle it, it becomes an escape. I'm not the body, I'm not the mind, I'm not the senses, and it's just like a parrot. People repeat like parrot. And I've studied Vedanta for 10 years. But if you understand Vedanta properly, then it becomes a lifetime's job to what? This faculty of mind, which is all distorted and all fraught with all these problems, it can take lifetime to undo it all and to have clarity, which then enables you to understand the bigger reality. Okay? So therefore, this memory is a function. Now, there is a fourth function, which is what we call ahankara.
So the antakarna is basically...
Antakarna is the internal, karana means instrument, and internal instrument. So that means this whole faculty of what we call mind, but that mind itself is divided into four facets. One is manas, so that means, because the unfortunate thing is that manas is generally translated as mind. So then all the other functions, so that's why that the overall name is antakarana within that four categories. The first one is manas, the second is buddhi, the third is chittam, the memory, and the fourth is ahankara. Right? So now this ahankara is also another thing which in when I give this classes of Vedanta, so people very often ask me, so what does ahankara mean? Does it mean ego? If I use the word ego, what is the meaning that you give to this word ego? Negative. Exactly. So there is some kind of a negative connotation with reference to ahankara. And then you want to get rid of your ahankara. So elimination of ahankara becomes like spiritual pursuit. Here in Vedanta, ahankara is a function of the mind. Right? What is aham is I, kara means that sense of I. So therefore, there is
AHANON.
so the sandhi rule makes it into ahankara. N, yeah. But otherwise it is aham and kara, but the sandhi rule makes it into ahankara. Ahankara is a function of the mind. Please understand. You are born with this I sense. Kara is sense of I. What is this sense of I? This sense of I is an interesting thing. When certain emotion is taking place, let's say that of sadness, okay, what do you tell? Do you just experience the emotion or do you say, I am sad? Exactly. So that means there is an I thought, please understand, right, which gets connected with what? Whichever emotion is at that given point in time and imputes that emotion to what? I. Okay, so therefore all your emotional life, whatever that thought is, gets imputed on I. Even though the emotions are changing, so you keep on, one day you say I'm happy, next day you say you are sad, because every emotion, just what it is, instead of seeing it as it is, it gets imputed onto I. But that's a human program, so you don't need to correct it. That's how human being is wired. Okay. Now the second thing is not only your emotions but your cognitive capacity. You go to school and the teacher is teaching you different theories and you are able to understand them well. Okay? So that means what? Your buddhi is operating well because you are able to capture ideas accurately. But what do you tell yourself? I am intelligent. One thing is your faculty working well, but what happens? You impute that onto I. Right? And what, for example, so that means you begin to have, right, a self-opinion. The self-opinion can be, I am really intelligent, right, and I am emotionally also what? Healthy. I'm a cool person. So you can keep on building what? That I sense. If the parents give positive feedback, then what? The child begins to have good self-worth, confidence. Your whole I sense, it's all work on your I sense. Please understand. What is your self-worth? Okay. A lot of times the major problem people have is lack of self-worth. The minute somebody abuses you and you choose not to do it because you don't have enough self-worth, you feel that you don't deserve better treatment. Then you blame the person, but actually there is a problem of self-worth. Even to begin to realize that, it takes people years. They are passive, they choose to be passive, and then what? They attribute all the problems to somebody else. Okay? So that means this I sense is something which is what? You take together your emotions, you put together what? Your cognitive capacity, you put together what? Your memories, and you create an I sense. So in the sense, as I told you, that memory of a child feeling I'm responsible for what happened to my parents, right? Then that interferes with what? That ahankara, that sense of I the person has is what? Damaged, because the person constantly feels that what? I'm to be blamed, I'm responsible for many things that happen. Okay? So your I sense builds over a period of time and gives you a sense of identity. And this is why each one, if I ask you who you are deeply, we all have different what? Self-identities based on what has happened to us, and also the meaning that we have given to what has happened to us, and also the functions, the faculties that we have. Can say I'm intelligent, somebody can say I'm emotionally intelligent, I have IQ, somebody says I have EQ. So that means you have a whole sense of I, which is what is ahankara, right? Now everybody operates thinking that this ahankara is true I. This is the only reality about it. What does Vedanta say? That this ahankara, that I sense, it gets what? Sometimes it gets what? Connected with your memory. Sometimes it gets connected with your cognitive capacity. Sometimes it gets connected with your emotions, right? So that means, and emotions are changing, cognitive capacities are changing, memories are changing, and this I sense is also equally changing, but it seems like to you like what? A permanent real entity. Okay, now what Vedanta says is, who are you? You are not this ahankara, you are chit. You are the awareness, because of which what? The changing conditions of your I sense are also known to you. So that means the mind, antakarana, has 4 types of facets of thinking. One is emotions, which present choices. The other one is buddhi, which enables you to make decisions. Then the memories and your sense of I. All these are variable. Who are you is the awareness, because of which you can see everything which is variable. Now, this awareness is already independent of whatever sense of I that you have. You can have good self-esteem, I can have bad self-esteem, or whatever, right? And regardless of whatever self-esteem, whatever cognitive capacity, whatever memory, whatever emotions, whatever happens, they are all very different, but that awareness is never affected by any of the 4 functions. But because it is not affected by any of the 4 functions, you cannot ignore those functions. Because imagine your sense of I is what you constantly blame yourself. Now Vedanta shows that awareness, because of which you see this sense of persecution, is already free. When you go out there, will you operate from freedom, or will you operate from that feeling of a self-blame? Tomorrow, when you walk out, and you have years and years of orientation that I'm no good, I'm responsible for everything, I have done. So that means you've created such a huge story, and you have listened to 1 hour of Vedanta. What will have more strength when you go out there? What you have learnt now, or what you have been and what you have thought all these years?
You hear it, but you also just not
Only one of
it's all these years conditioning.
Exactly. All these years of conditioning And all these distorted thinking that you have is not going to be erased
In 1 hour.
in 1 hour of Vedanta. But what is very important is, before you had no other input. Now Vedanta is giving you what? New input. But this has taken its deep roots. Now to undo that and to that whatever Vedanta teaches you, for that to take deep root, how long does it take? It requires time, it requires energy, it requires effort. Because there is a strength of what? Your past interpretation. That I feel that I'm no good is not going to be erased by what? This feeling that, I'm free from everything. So therefore, that there is years of what? Reorientation. Because these orientations that we have acquired, it is a result of what? Our every situation has occurred, we have given it what? We have further strengthened those conclusions and we have built on that. So it is like this, you have two ropes and I keep on what? Knotting it and knotting it and knotting it further and further. Now if I ask you to undo it, would you be able to undo it in one time? No. It will require, because it has become complex. Slowly, but you can't, you have no other choice.
With patience and perseverance.
Absolutely. Okay, so therefore, even though, so this charioteer is not is not I, the chariot owner, in order to reach the destination, has to have what? The charioteer who is skillful. So all these faculties of emotions, cognitive capacity, memory and sense of I, even though it is not I, from dysfunctional you have to make it what? Functional. Only then that bigger thing you will understand.
That will happen only through the knowledge.
That will happen. Bhagavad Gita takes care of it. This is why it is an amazing book. It is just mind-blowing that there is a book like this. It has the whole methodology to help you to undo all of this mess that we have created because of our lack of clarity. Okay, so now what is the time? 1:45. Okay, so now I will stop. So all this is not I. Then we think that I know what I is, but what is I is even bigger surprise. So now we will see it in the next class.
We don't have class next Tuesday.
So I'll just close with the prayer. Then Om Purnamadah Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnamevavashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Hari Om.